But there's a second feature of the universe we can look at. It's not just that the universe had a beginning, but it's that the universe is fine-tuned for life. So as we go and we do physics, and in the process of doing physics, we come down to these fundamental constants, like the strength of gravity, or something called the cosmological constant, or these other fundamental forces, the strength of the strong electric force, the weak electric force. And what we've discovered is that if any of these forces were a little bit larger or a little bit smaller, the universe as we know it could not exist. If gravity or the cosmological constant were too large, then rather than expand out, everything would collapse upon itself. If it was too small, the universe would dissipate, we wouldn't get any galaxies, we wouldn't have any stars. Without any stars or galaxies, you can't have chemicals, you can't have life, right? So if any of these constants were just a little bit different, then the universe as we know it couldn't exist, we couldn't have life. This has been such a profound observation over the last few decades that Fred Hoyle, someone who was an outspoken atheist, but a physicist, as he came and he studied this, he said, nothing has shaken my atheism as much as this discovery. That the fundamental constants of physics and of chemistry and of biology are just rightly tuned for life to exist. He goes on to say, this is him speaking as an atheist, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics, has fine-tuned it, has made it just right, as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion beyond question. He says this couldn't just blindly happen. There must be some kind of intelligence behind it. And this is him speaking as an atheist. I really respect the fact that he's intellectually honest enough when he comes and he sees this, he says, hey, there must be something going on here. So Fred Hoyle gives us a metaphor and analogy to help us understand just how unlikely it is that this could happen by chance. And so I want to demonstrate to you Fred Hoyle's metaphor, but to do so I'm going to need two volunteers. So can I have two volunteers just quickly come to the front? Two volunteers. And hopefully you don't mind being blindfolded. So this is Fred Hoyle's analysis of could this have happened blindly? And so here's what Fred Hoyle says. He says, okay, to think about this happening blindly, imagine two people blindfolded. So I'm just going to blindfold you. Is that okay? And I'm going to put one on you. Is it possible that this blindly could have happened? He says, here's a metaphor to help you understand how unlikely this is. So Fred Hoyle says, imagine you have two people who are blindfolded, and then you have two Rubik's Cubes that are mixed up. And so I'm going to hand you a Rubik's Cube right here, and I'm going to let you just start randomly moving the pieces to see what happens. And I'm going to give you a mixed up Rubik's Cube, see if I can mix it up a little bit. And I'll just let you randomly move it around. And this is Fred Hoyle. It says, imagine you have two people randomly working on solving a Rubik's Cube. Now, would you expect them to be able to solve it? Well, maybe not, but maybe given enough time, you could, and you can do the math. In a Rubik's Cube, there's about 43 quintillion possibilities. That's 43 billion possibilities. And so if you're moving one per second, it'll take you a little bit over 1 trillion years to hit the right one. Right? He says, maybe given enough time. But he says, no, that's not how you understand these odds. It's much less likely than that. He says, the probability you began to understand is, imagine you're both blindly twisting and trying to solve the Rubik's Cube, and you happen to solve it at the exact same time. He says, that's going to begin to give you some insight to how unlikely it is that these forces are arranged in just the right way. But he says, it's not just two people blindly solving the Rubik's Cube. Imagine the whole congregation here, we all have blindfolds on, and we're all solving Rubik's Cubes. And we all happen at the exact same time to solve it. He says that will give you some insight to how unlikely it is that these forces are arranged at just the right values. Thank you very much. You can remove your blindfolds. You didn't quite solve it, but you got close. Thanks a lot. So when you look at fine-tuning, Individuals like Fred Hoyle, committed atheists, say there's something going on here. Naturalism is insufficient to explain this. It's begging for some kind of explanation that Genesis accounts for. Interestingly enough, when you read the Genesis creation account, when God creates, it's an account of fine-tuning. It's an account of God ordering and structuring the universe. So this is a quick aside, but I think it's worth noting. As you go through the 6 days of creation, did you realize that there was an order or an intentionality to those days? What did God create on the first day? He separates the light from the darkness. The second day, separates the waters above from waters below. Third day, separates the water from the land. Fourth day, objects of light, the sun and the moon, he declares as such. Fifth day, fish and birds. And then sixth day, animals and humans. So what's the order going on here? Check it. First day, light and darkness. Fourth day, sun and moon. Second day, water above, water below, atmosphere and sea. Fifth day, birds and fish. Third day, land, separated from water. Sixth day, animals of land, animals and ultimately humans. God is preparing or separating the first 3 days, and the next 3 days filling those spaces. It's a forming and filling pattern. Do you see that? On the first day, he forms light and darkness, and then on the fourth day, he fills the light with sun and the darkness with moon. On the second day, he forms water separated from atmosphere, and then the fifth day, he fills that with fish and birds. Interesting aside, what happens on the seventh day? How does this pattern continue? What is he forming, and what is he filling it with? If it's a pattern of form, fill, form, fill, form, fill, what happens come the seventh day? What kind of space does he form? He forms a space and time, and he fills it with himself. That's the story of creation. God is fine-tuning the universe, ultimately to form a space that he can fill with himself, to be with us.